it was my first time where I actually had the moment of awareness and awakening, because I read this portion in the book that was like, you can control your emotions. And I was like, what? I was not really given permission to feel. And I was really boxed into this very masculine doer, go-getter, rather than allowing myself to have that balance of flowing and femininity. And I think honestly that's part of what has led me to achieve so much in so many different areas, was because that feminine flow is very much from following my curiosity to where it led me.
Many people want to navigate life with peace and joy, but struggle to connect to their intuition. They find themselves overwhelmed, burned out, and frustrated. My name is Francesca Phillips, and I'm obsessed with spirituality and psychology and how the two can intersect to help you live a successful and intuitive life. I believe each of us can accomplish amazing things through balance and healthy habits instead of burnout. Consider this your go-to resource for where spiritual wellness and mindful productivity meets practical wisdom. If you're craving positivity and want to know how to find the answers within instead of searching endlessly without, then you're in the right place. Get ready to feel supported and inspired. This is the Good Space Podcast. You're listening to the Good Space Podcast, episode number 12. Before we dive in, I want to give my warm appreciation to our reviewer of the week, Mama Unicorn. And she says, Francesca has a beautiful way of taking complex ideas and breaking them down into accessible pieces through thoughtful interview questions and insightful quotes. Her passion and thoughtfulness for the topic are evident. Listening to this podcast is a great way to start the day. Thank you so much, Mama Unicorn. I love that nickname, by the way. I'm so happy you enjoy the interviews and find the information easy to digest. I'm grateful you chose to start the day together by listening in. Thank you, thank you. If you want to be highlighted in an upcoming episode and help further the mission of the Good Space, make sure to subscribe and give us a review on Apple Podcasts so I can then highlight your review in an upcoming episode. It only takes a minute. You can pause the episode and come right back. Make sure to screenshot this episode on your phone and tag us on your Instagram story @FindYourGoodSpace, #TheGoodSpace, to let me know that you're joining in today, as you know that I love to share those screenshots on our stories too. All right, let's begin. Kimberly is an award-winning coach to high-achieving go-getters who want holistic success and fulfillment. But life didn't start that way. Kimberly was raised in an environment where addiction and codependency were the norm. On the outside, people believed she had her stuff together. She co-wrote a film starring actor Danny Trejo and sold it to Lionsgate. She competed in Miss California USA, won Miss Congeniality, and had a bunch of other Miss titles. She acted in London at a prestigious school, became a certified Pilates instructor, was named Pilates Pro by Oxygen magazine, and owned her own studio for 10 years. She was also the president and spokeswoman of a national online company that sold a backstretching device and pitched it to the first round of Shark Tank. And she ran 4 full marathons. Despite the outward success, Kimberly felt she was acting both in her relationships with others and herself. No matter what she did, she never felt it was enough, that she needed to prove over and over again her worth. Until one day she stepped radically into her power and everything changed. Now she's a mom, certified high-performance coach, hosts a podcast, offers courses, a book, and a blog. What doesn't she do? I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, Francesca, of course. Sometimes hearing your bio back, you're like, damn, I really have done a lot.
You really have. And I think it's incredible because there is such a stigma around doing multiple things and, oh, I have to figure out my path right now and it has to be the right thing. And people feel bad when they don't get it right. But you have done so many things. So can you explain to us what that was like, what that process was like, and how you eventually got to where you are now?
I really got permission early on. When I was in high school, in my senior year, I was this like massive achiever. Not like that's changed. But when I was in my senior year, I was this achiever in all the ways that I thought I needed to prove myself to follow and fit into the roles that I thought I was supposed to follow. I thought, yes, I'm going to college after this. I thought, okay, I have to, in order to get to college, the colleges that I wanted to go were very prestigious. I was taking all these AP classes and I was doing the ones in the subjects that I liked, but I still was striving for that achiever role to be in all of the subjects. And, science and math just aren't my jam unless it's got a dollar sign and a plus sign next to it. Like it's not my favorite thing to add. I was so depressed in my senior year of high school. And the path that I thought was what I was supposed to do or what I should do wasn't happening. I was getting rejected countless times from so many schools, even though I had a great GPA. I was nearly a straight A student. I was in all these classes. I was doing all the quote unquote right things. And yet I still was getting all this rejection from colleges. And I was striving to achieve so hard and I wasn't seeing the results. And it made me really, really depressed. And to give my mom massive credit, when I was 17 years old, and it was about 6 months before I graduated, she said, Kim, I would much rather have you happy and living into your purpose than being in high school. If you want to drop out, you can drop out. And I was like, what?
Wow.
What parent says that? And she said, well, I've always known you want to be in film, you want to be in Hollywood. She's like, why don't you you're an amazing networker. I'd already been in script writing competitions. I had already won awards for my screenplays that I had been writing with mentors. She's like, if you just want to drop out and just start, then I will support you in that. Anything that will help you get happier and make you feel like you're more on purpose. She's like, you don't need biology at this point. Having that permission, I didn't end up dropping out, but just having that permission and kind of the moment of realizing that all the stress and all the pressure was 100% put on by me, because I was putting myself and contorting myself to fit into this perceived path that I thought was what I should do, that I thought was what would make, my parents happy, me feel like enough. And it just wasn't the case. And I ended up getting 2 scholarships to go to college. And I dropped out 2 weeks before I was supposed to start because I found this acting class that just lit my soul on fire. And it really was about following my curiosity all throughout 10 years after high school that allowed me to get to where I am now, which is now living longer than a month in Australia. We've been here for 4. So it's just been from a place of 100% following my curiosity. And from that acting class, that was where I learned to feel. That was where I got my hands on my first personal development book, which was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because that was what my acting teacher recommended. And I remember back then I was 17 years old. I was the youngest in the class. And as a former straight A student, I, of course, was going to get all the book recommendations about what I, should be reading and should be doing. And I get this list of book recommendations from my acting teacher. And the first one, it says, this is the most important book you will ever read. And I was like, okay. I went to Barnes & Noble, or maybe it was Borders back then. And
Yes.
I grabbed the book and I started thumbing through it. And I was like, this has nothing to do with Hollywood or succeeding in Hollywood or acting or the craft. And I was like, what is this habit stuff? And cause I had habits, not very healthy habits back then. And it was my first time where I actually had the moment of awareness and awakening, because I read this portion in the book that was you can control your emotions. And I was like, what? Because I'd lived in such a reactive home where emotions were ignored. They were not allowed. My mom didn't like to deal with them. She's very logical brained. My dad would try to escape from them, or he would perceive emotions like sadness to be manipulative. And so I was not really given permission to feel. And I was really boxed into this very masculine doer, go-getter, rather than allowing myself to have that balance of flowing and femininity. And I think honestly that's part of what has led me to achieve so much in so many different areas, was because that feminine flow is very much from following my curiosity to where it led me. And yes, it was definitely combined with the masculine doing energy. But when my gut had that hit to drop out of college, when my gut had that hit to go to this networking event where I met my writing partner, when we ended up writing a film together, where my gut had the hit to suddenly become a Pilates instructor to support my career in Hollywood, when my gut had the hit to say yes to jumping into this e-commerce company, to joining forces with my then business partner. That was a gut hit as well. And the times where I have been led astray is when I didn't listen to those gut intuition hits that were like, maybe you should pay attention to that. Or maybe you should not date that person. Or that's an interesting thing that person said. Maybe you should just put a pin in that and explore what that is. Because, and when I'm like, no, when I would shove that aside for the sake of achievement, for the sake of a goal, that would be when I got into trouble.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. You said so many amazing things, and it perfectly segues into what I wanted to talk to you about, was the balance of the feminine and masculine energies in our life and how that translates into our work, our relationships, and just life in general. And I know that working in the music industry, I worked in the music industry for like 6 years, and then you and film, it's a very masculine energy driven world. And just in general, I think even outside of those industries. So was it just that you were so purely open when you went to that acting class and the seed was planted and it just rang as truth to you? Or when did you really start to recognize the need for that balance? And how did it start changing everything for you?
It was very much that intuitive. Like, I was so, because I remember the moment when I went to that acting class and I saw people on stage like feeling, because I'd seen acting before, but acting before was very stage-like. It wasn't living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And what I learned from that acting class still plays a part as a coach today, because that's the foundation of manifestation, is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances and imagining your world better than what your past conditioning has allowed you to have, and what drives fear. Faith is imagining. It's imagining a greater world, a greater reality for yourself until it comes true. And acting as if it already is coming true, with the certainty that it is, you are experiencing it now in the moment. So when I saw acting for real, like real people living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, I was like, holy moly, like I saw truth and beauty in that. It wasn't faking it. And I've just always gravitated toward those things that were just so true and beautiful, even when I didn't quite know what they were yet. Like when I met my husband, he's 19 years older than I am, and he's very true and beautiful. And when we had that connection, and I was like, this is interesting. And I had never pictured myself with someone 19 years older than me. But at the same time, I was like, this is so honest and raw and real. And I was like, this is what I'm going to hold on to. And it was interesting because I was in a relationship before that. And my mom had asked me, like, was that guy the one? And I said, no, but I think the one after him will be. And it was just a gut intuitive hit. And then I met my husband. It really is allowing you, trusting your gut and trusting that like deep seated knowing and remembering who you are and who you always have been. Because now looking back on my life, like, yes, my path was very, very curly Q and of like a freaking roller coaster. But one of the questions I ask all of my clients is, when you were about 4, 5, or 6 years old, who were you? What did you want to be? What did you want to do? And when you think of that question, about 4, 5, 6 years old is before you've accepted other people's programming as true. You still are living in this beautiful space as a 4, 5, 6-year-old of imagination, of really that space of play where you're doing. Like my son, he is almost 3 now, and he learns so fast, but he's learning through playing, through following his curiosity, for not being really beholden to like, I'm in my Spanish lesson right now. Like he loves his Spanish lessons, but he's in his Spanish lessons for like 15 minutes. And then he's like off, playing with his trucks. And then he's following his curiosity. And he's learning so much in the process of that. And I think as adults, we get very contorted into this space of doing and learning in this specific way, when really the time of our fastest growth is from 0 to 6. In psychology, that's called the imprint period. It's in that period where you actually get most of your subconscious programming. And like right now, my son is just a giant walking subconscious mind, and he doesn't know the difference between something that's right or wrong or good or bad. He just knows what he's told, and he's following the direction that he's told. He's experiencing the world, modeling the behavior that he's seeing. And so when I ask that question of my clients of who did you want to be when you're about 4, 5, 6 years old, I look back at what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes perfect sense. Like, I wanted to be a princess. I wanted to be a princess. I wanted to direct and write and transform stories. I would put on these productions in my backyard of shows that would highlight transformational stories of really powerful women, of princesses that I admired. I didn't admire the Snow Whites, the Cinderellas, the Sleeping Beauties who just needed to be kissed or lose a shoe. I admired the Belles, like the Pocahontases, yes, the Ariels, the ones who challenged, the ones who saw, like especially Belle, and the ones who saw that beauty in somebody and who transformed the people around them and transformed the perceptions of people around them because of who they were at their core. Those were the stories that I really gravitated to. And my mom, even as a child, like she would seek out interesting princess stories, and you'd be surprised how few of them there were back then. Like there were not very many princess stories of heroic princesses, and those were the stories that I would produce and I would direct. And I look back on the theme of my life, and I've always been in the business of transforming people's stories. When I was an actor and a writer, hearing that I transformed somebody's story from the film that I wrote with my writing partner and the director of the film, Nick Parada, like when I heard that from a friend of mine who attended the premiere, when I heard that a boy who had come to that premiere had changed his life around because of the story he had seen on the screen, because he was following into the same pattern. Because basically the story is a young kid who wants to be a part of the cool crowd. He ends up falling in line with a whole bunch of motocross riders, and then he starts falling out of line and falling into like drug dealing. And this boy had been following along the same path, not necessarily motocross, but just hanging out with the wrong crowd and adapting who he was in order to fit in instead of really belong. When I heard that he had changed his life, he'd stopped hanging out with the crowd that he was hanging out with, he'd stopped doing drugs because of the film that I wrote, I was like, what? That's amazing. That was the best feeling ever. And I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. That's what I want to do. And I did that with Pilates. As a Pilates instructor for 10 years, I changed people's stories about what was possible for their bodies. I rehabbed so many backs and post-pregnancies of like how your body is just a miraculous vessel that can change and transform people's stories about their own body image. And even as an e-commerce business owner, like my business was around transforming people's stories about back pain and how they could heal and recover and feel stronger and more flexible with our device that we were selling. And now as a coach, that's what I do daily, is transforming people's stories. And I do it now with my company called Crown Yourself. So I get to be a princess. Yes. And I'm the director, which is base of the show, which basically is what a CEO does, is you're the director of your business. You are the producer of your business. And I'm the writer of my content. And I am the performer of my live streams. And I'm the performer on podcasts and other people's podcasts. So I'm really doing everything that I wanted to do, just not in the exact vein or form that I thought it would be when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And when I've asked this question of my clients, I've gotten some amazing answers of like, they just wanted to help people. Or like one of my clients, she wanted to be a nun and a nurse. Now as an adult, she's a shaman and a midwife. It's not the exact same form, but she always wanted to have that medical service and spiritual service. And now, even though she's not a nun, she's a shaman, it's still the spiritual service. And she's not a nurse, but she's a midwife. She's offering that medical service that she always wanted to. And when you look at from that vein of like, who did you want to be when you're about 4, 5, 6 years old? And also, what did you get in trouble for? Because that will give you some ideas for your branding. So for me, I got in trouble for challenging. When I was about 4, 5, 6 years old, I would challenge my dad's behavior. And I didn't know back then that you probably shouldn't challenge someone who was intoxicated. And so I would see him in his highest and best, which is also one of my superpowers, is I see people in their highest and best in what it is that they want to accomplish. When you say to me what it is you want to dream, what your dream is, I already see it. If you paint that picture for me, I'm like, yes, you can totally achieve that. I had one client I worked with for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, she was like, holy moly, did you ever think I would get here? Because when we first started, she was going through divorce and lots of relational identity struggles. And then by the end, she was scaling $1 million company. And she said, Kim, did you ever think that I would get to this place? And I was like, 100%, absolutely. Because I've always seen people in that space of like that highest and best, that possibility of what they can achieve, of what they want for themselves and for their life. And I would see that with my dad. And I'm so grateful for the home that I grew up in, because it was the best training ground for me as a coach. And I would challenge my dad's behavior because I would see him when he was awesome and sober. And then I would see him when he was drunk and frankly an asshole. And I would challenge that behavior. I wouldn't do it in the appropriate time because, like I said, my family didn't really like the expression of emotion. And now I'm like, I see that the feminine energy, it is very emotional, but that can actually be a superpower. Having emotions are a signal of something to work on, or a signal of something, like, especially the negative ones, they're a signal of something that's deeper, that needs to be uncovered, that needs to be uprooted if it's bothering you at that level. And the thing that always bothered me was hypocrisy and that incongruence with somebody not fulfilling their full potential of who they say they want to be, but then not really leaning into it. And that's something that my childhood really trained me for, which I'm very grateful for. Now, knowing what I know about emotions and having worked with so many leaders on uncovering and unlocking their feelings as a tool and as a guide, it changes the game for leadership when a leader is allowed and has the permission to feel all their feelings. Now, not always in every situation can you appropriately feel all your feelings, like in front of your team or in front of your employees. Because if you are flipping out as a leader, then your team and your employees will follow where you're leading. So there is a way and a process of being able to feel and release negative emotions and then allow them to reveal the lessons or the incongruences that need to be corrected to bring things back into alignment.
Wow, you just shared so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. I'm thinking of the person who's listening to this right now. If they might be thinking, oh, I wonder what I got in trouble with at school or with my family. And if they are thinking of that thing, how do we use that information? So like for me, I got in trouble at school for talking all the time. I'm trying to think of like what I got in trouble with at home.
Podcast.
Yeah, I know. That when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So for anyone listening to this right now and they're thinking, ooh, I got in trouble for that, what does that mean?
A lot of times that's the conditioning and the plagiarized programming that eventually a lot of people adopt subconsciously. Like we don't necessarily choose it, but what I experienced, to give you an example, was when I would get angry at hypocrisy, I would flip out. I wouldn't know how to experience my emotions. I wouldn't have permission to experience them. So I would like bottle them down and then I would explode and basically vomit them up, which it's no surprise to me looking back that I had 10 years of bulimia, because that's exactly what bulimia is. And then on top of it, when I would explode, I then would be corralled back into my home and sat down in a prayer circle and have to pray for my anger issues. That really contorted my relationship with God for a while about that, because I said, no, in my gut, in my knowing, in my soul, I'm like, this is not right. Like, this is funky. It just didn't make sense to me. But I felt shame then for feeling my emotions. So what shame does is shame loves secrets. And so when you bottle it down, or when you're shamed for being something, or for talking too much, or for being too bold, or for being too ambitious, or for having crazy audacious dreams, or for being fearless, when you're shamed for that, eventually you put on enough shame and it shrouds that genius that always was. And we accept it, and we say, okay, maybe I shouldn't talk too much. Okay, maybe I shouldn't really stand out that much. Okay, maybe I shouldn't experience my emotions. Maybe something's wrong with me if I'm feeling these really deep, powerful feelings. I would say, first of all, nothing's wrong with you. The plagiarized programming, the conditioning, if you look at it now as an adult, it's just other people who didn't have permission to use their voice, or it's other people who didn't have permission, who weren't as adults giving themselves permission to be bold, or who weren't as adults giving themselves permission to feel their feelings. So it does come with having to forgive. Like, I definitely have had some long conversations with my parents, who I have a great relationship with now that my dad is sober, at least off of alcohol. That was the big one.
Wow.
And I've had some great conversations about feelings, and about having the conversations about feeling and forgiving other people. Because I truly believe that everyone is doing the best that they can with the resources, the tools, the thinking patterns, and the beliefs that they currently have. I don't think that it's intentional. I don't think my parents intended to shame me for feeling. They just also didn't know how to experience their feelings. They didn't know. And so having this daughter who's like super in touch with her emotions, it's like being in a funhouse mirror. And I sometimes think that we're blessed with the children that we need to help us remember who we are, so that there's a reflection. I mean, I say I've worked with some amazing coaches in the past 3-4 years, and no coach has been better than my son. Because when my son was 6 months old, I saw how he processed shame, and I was like, ooh, that's how I do it. Oh, okay, I can shift that. And he was like the best mirror for me. So there is, when you look back at the things that you were either shamed for as a child, or that were kind of programmed or conditioned out of you, there is a space for granting forgiveness for those who said those things, or who said you shouldn't be too loud, or who said you shouldn't be too bold, because they were just living by their own programming, their own indoctrination of what they had been taught, and what had kind of been taught out of them, rather than, I don't believe it came from a place of malintent. I believe it really, like, especially for my parents, like, it came from a place of good intent. Like, they wanted me to survive, but that's not how I really choose to live. I choose to have my emotions, and to be able to enjoy the full rainbow and the full spectrum of what they provide, and the insights that they provide for me for my own personal and professional development, and the insights that they provide for all the leaders that I get to work with, for what their journey is, and what they need to work on, and what they can uncover and unlock within themselves.
Yes. Oh, that's great. And it's crazy because when you meet you, like when I've met you and other people, you come off as just so genuine and like not ashamed of your emotions, and just you are who you are. And it really is amazing to hear that you weren't that way at some point and you had to learn your way and grow your way into that. So for someone who is struggling to embrace those emotions and to just without shame be who they are, I'm curious how they should go about feeling safe enough to do that, and how they can not feel embarrassed or smaller than they actually are. Like, what are the first steps that you would recommend?
Well, it always starts with you giving yourself permission first. Like I give you permission if you need it, but you don't need it from me. But it starts with you giving yourself permission to strip away and see what life could be like without that piece of programming, without that conditioning that says you shouldn't speak up, without that conditioning that says you shouldn't raise your voice, without that conditioning that says you should play small and be small and fit into this little box. Just play with it and allow yourself to play and give yourself that permission. It takes a lot of courage. It really does. I remember the night that I met my husband, I was very skilled at performing in all of my relationships prior to my husband. I was very skilled at performing and fitting myself into the boxes of the roles that I thought the other person wanted so that I could feel love. Because with any belief, there are 3 Trojan horses, as I call them. With every belief, it gives you safety, it gives you some feeling of control, and it gives you some feeling of acceptance and acknowledgement. I would get acceptance and acknowledgement from men by fitting into the boxes that they really wanted for who they really wanted to be in a relationship with, not really for who I was at my core. So I wouldn't let my weird side or my silly side or my too sexy side show. But the thing is, you can't keep up that charade for forever, or else you feel like you've lost a bit of your soul. And so when I first was driving to the networking event where I met my husband, I was not praying for a relationship. I was praying for just to be 100% honest and authentic. I said, all I want was just to be 100% honest and authentic. And then at this networking event, this guy swaggers up to me with such confidence and
wow.
And I see him and I'm like, very sexy. And I'm not quite sure how to handle this. And my past self would have wanted to perform for him. And I said, no. And I said, I remembered my commitment that I literally made 2 hours before. And I was super authentic. I shared with him things that I hadn't shared with my best girlfriends. My best girlfriends didn't know I was married prior to. They thought I was just engaged. I had eloped when I was 22 with my ex-husband, and we were only married for like 9 months when he was deployed, and then he came back and I was like, nope, that's not going to work. If we can't get along when you're on the other side of the world, it's not going to really work out if we're in the same house together. And so, but I told him that I had been married before. I had such shame. I carried, like I said, shame loves secrets. So I had such shame about that. I shared it with him and he accepted it. And you'll never get full 100% acceptance until you are fully ready and have the courage to fully show up and accept all of you, the mistakes, the messes, the things that you're not proud of that you may have done in your past. Until you are fully willing and ready to accept all of you, you will never fully find full acceptance, because that's where shame lives. It's in those spaces of those things that we did that in our past that we're not proud of. When you have that acceptance, when you can accept the fact that that happened, whatever it was, and I've had a lot of shit that happened, when you can accept the fact that that was what happened and that was a moment, how do you live on from that moment? What do you make that moment mean for you? And for me, I shared with him things that I had not been proud of, things that I was desperately scared of, but I chose in that moment of like literally first meeting. So I did everything wrong that you're not supposed to do on a first like meeting of as a guy that you're attracted to. Like I was like, oh, here's all my baggage. Now see if you want to come and like enjoy all of this. He actually loved the fact that I was so authentic. He loved the fact that I was 100% real, and he accepted it. That is true acceptance. And so we've always had the foundation now almost 8 years in where it's always been candor first and having those candid conversations that are not always comfortable, but that really reveal truth and that really have beauty underneath them. Because when you can connect with that truth, and sometimes it's just having the conversation and then just no action is really needed beyond that. but having those true conversations and fully accepting and having the courage to have those conversations, because being candid with all of you and owning all of who you are and all of who you have been and all of your past and all of your mistakes and all of those things that you are not proud of. And I'm not saying you have to share everything with the world. I do think that there is, in a lot of social media, a lot of sharing from a space of wanting to get that acknowledgement and that attention. And there are many things that I don't publicly share, but I've shared them with the people that they involved. And in that space, like, that alone can be freeing from shame, because shame loves secrets. So I'm not saying that you have to go out and blast everything about your life on a podcast of everything that happened. What I am saying is sometimes it's just about having those personal one-on-one conversations with those persons or people that you felt either wronged by or that just didn't allow you to fully express all of who you are. And now, as a strong, powerful queen or king, you can own the fact that you are making your own choices and you're choosing your programming now.
So powerful. Everything you said just hit me to the core. It was very, very powerful. Obviously, getting to where you are now took time. It took courage. It took a lot of reflection and just being honest with yourself, with others. Is there a spiritual practice that you have that maintains or reminds you or increases your ability to continue embracing those emotions and being fully who you are?
I would say the spiritual practices is trust and faith. And it is a practice. It's not a pill. Like, you aren't going to like pop a pill and suddenly have like massive faith. It is a practice of building that relationship with, like any relationship. It takes time and it takes work. And especially if in your past or in your childhood, there were other pieces of programming that didn't really fit into what that deep knowing and soul connection that I believe we all have with whatever it is that you want to call it, source, God, the universe. I call it God. And that connection with faith and trust, it does take time to rebuild. It does take time to allow yourself to feel supported, to allow yourself to, especially if you haven't felt supported in the past or felt like the world was a dark and ugly place, like, if you've lived by that, then it will take a period of reprogramming and rebuilding and a practice and a daily commitment to building that relationship with your soul, with your gut, to trusting it again. And for me, it came from a few experiences of seeing where, when I had not listened to that deep knowing, to that deep gut sensation that said, yeah, this might be not the best thing for you, and then still blazing ahead forward, that experience of this might not be the best thing for you, and then still going forward, those moments of saying, no, I'm going to make it work. This is going to happen. And as my mentor, Brendon Burchard, says, it's not achievement that is your problem, especially if you're a high achiever, which are most of the people that I work with. It's alignment. And when you're making those choices that are out of alignment from the space of forcing or pushing, that's using the masculine energy. But the thing is that energy, period, like if you look at an electrical socket, energy flows from the feminine to the masculine. The masculine energy pushes in to the electrical socket. So you actually have the electrical socket and it pushes in, but it's already churning inside the feminine. The feminine has to be, one, willing to receive the masculine energy of the doing. But the masculine, when it forces or pushes in, in sexuality, that's called rape. In energy, it gunks up your circuits. So when you're trying to force or push something into a socket that isn't willing to receive those divine downloads, isn't willing to open itself up to possibility, isn't willing to open itself up to guidance first, then it's like this pushing of like, I'm going to make this practice or thing work for me. So that's why, like, I have spiritual practices that I do. I journal. I pray, I meditate every day, but I'm not beholden to the doing of the practices, because sometimes it's not the practice that you're worshiping of doing the journaling on a daily basis and having it be like, this is my doing checklist of things that I need to check off in little boxes. It's allowing for those moments of receptivity. It's allowing for those moments and the space for that divine download. It's allowing for that patience, and which is a constant thing that I'm working on, which is why I've been blessed with a toddler. It's allowing for that patience and that space of even sometimes boredom, because with boredom comes imagination, and it's allowing for yourself to have that creativity and that imagination for what could be possible. And it's also asking yourself, am I facing the right direction? So are you facing the direction toward fear, or are you facing the direction toward faith?
Yeah.
And faith does not necessarily mean a religion. It means faith in a vision greater than what you're living right now. Faith in a reality beyond what is possible. Faith in imagining your life and living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And in a spiritual practice, sometimes fear represents itself of like, oh my God, I didn't journal today. Like my manifestation's not going to come true. Or the big one that I experienced a few years ago was, oh my God, I was learning all about manifestation and mindset and the feminine energy. And I was learning so much. And I was so focused on only feeling the positive and raising my vibe and having that spiritual practice. I again circled back to my childhood programming of being so fearful of experiencing a negative emotion, because I had that fear of, oh my God, if I'm feeling a negative emotion, that means all of my manifestation is not going to come true. All the things that I'm focusing on is not going to come true. So I would suppress it down, pretend like it didn't exist. And that was the couple months in my business where I was like, why am I not making any money? Like I went from making 10 grand a month to then suddenly like plummeting to like less than 1,000. I was like, whoa. And
Wow.
it was just because I wasn't allowing myself to look at the shadow. I wasn't allowing myself to experience the signals of what those emotions would allow me to reveal, and the insights that were actually underneath the emotions. And once I gave myself the permission to feel and the faith that my manifestation, the things that I desire in my heart and in my soul, and the things that I believe were placed in my heart by the divine, my purpose, my goals, my vision for my life and my future, like the things that I believe were placed there and that I work to earn every day, because I believe earning comes after you already deserve it. But that experience of nothing can change that. The negative feelings that come along the journey are just the emotional contractions, the emotional labor that we all go through as we're birthing that version of ourselves who has, does, and is all that is that we desire to have, do, and be. And those negative emotions that we feel along the way, the frustrations, the anger, the sadness, those are signals of something that's deeper that we can unlock within us that are a part of the path. They're not straying us from the path. They're a part of it. And by looking at it from that perspective, it changes the game for things to happen a lot faster, actually, in manifestation, because you actually are moving forward through that contraction, through that experience, and so that you're onto the rest on the other side, so that you're onto the flow and the ease on the other side. And it's allowing for that space of that feminine receptivity again, as you do the work to move through those negative emotions.
I am so grateful for you and your energy and everything that you're sharing. I felt my heart and soul just aligning with everything you were saying. So I love it. And I am so grateful that I was able to meet you and your husband earlier this year before everything happened. You both are just so magical. And thank you. Just thank you so much for everything that you've shared. If there was one thing that you would want someone listening to take away, what would you want to leave them with?
Follow your curiosity and let your feelings give you the clues. Because allowing yourself to be curious. One of the great questions that allowed me to recover from 10 years of bulimia would be, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now, isn't that interesting is a question that allows for curiosity without judgment. Because immediately when you judge something, judgment has the preconception of malintent. And that's not necessarily what a feeling is or what a person is even. So allowing yourself to look at it from the perspective of curiosity, like almost like an anthropologist studying your own life, and then allowing yourself to explore what is it that is there that you need to uncover? What is it that is there that was maybe a trigger that is something that you need to learn? And what is it that is there that really allows you to dig in a bit and to find those nuggets of your own insight rather than what someone said that you should do or supposed to do? To circle back to my story of when I was in high school and a senior in high school struggling and was like, why am I not getting accepted to all of these colleges that I thought I was completely, like my college counselor was like, I don't know how this is happening. If I had asked myself that question of, isn't that interesting? Then it would have given me so much freedom of looking at it from the perspective without the judgment and saying, oh, maybe that's because it's not my path. Maybe because that the straight from high school to college to having a job is really not the best path for me. If you're not getting the results that you want in your life, and I've asked this question so many times since then, like with my business, when I was going through, when I went from 10K months to suddenly I was like doing less than 1,000 for a couple months. And I was like, whoa, isn't that interesting? What am I not allowing? And I wasn't allowing for myself to experience all the feelings. And I wasn't allowing myself to ask for help from my husband. I wasn't allowing myself to, because I was living by a story that I've shared many times with my community, that like the one time that my husband and I had like some problems in our marriage, it was because I was living by this story of being the breadwinner, of being the mother who does it all. And I wasn't asking for help from him. And if you're blessed to know my husband, he is the most generous man that you will ever meet, who will just like drop everything to help somebody. And he is, and especially me. And I just wasn't asking for help from him. And so when I looked at the results of like my life and my business, and I was like, why am I frustrated with my marriage? Why am I not allowing myself to experience my emotions? And why is my business not performing at the level that it was? I looked at it and I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? And I saw again the emotional component of allowing myself and giving myself the permission to feel what I was feeling and to examine the story behind the feelings. And once I allowed for that, it set me free. And it was just like suddenly so much goodness came in. I ended up closing my Pilates studio. That's when we went to Australia. I had multiple 10K months and just, it's been up from there. And it's been so wonderful and glorious, and traveling and being able to do it all with my baby and my hubby, and now being able to live in Australia for 3 months during a freaking pandemic. Like my husband and I have turned to each other multiple times over these past few months and have been like, there really has been no better place for us to be than right where we are right now. And I'm not surprised, because this is what we'd always wanted to manifest. And it just took the courage of leaning in to a lot of people saying we were crazy for deciding to stay in Australia, and took the courage to lean into that truth of who we've always wanted to be. And the truth, again, it was another level of we've always wanted to live and travel and have our children experience the world through travel and through experience instead of reading it in a book. So we just decided, okay, let's do it. And we leaned into it, and it's been amazing.
Wow. Kimberly, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your energy. I really appreciate it. And I hope that we'll have many more conversations in the future.
I agree, Francesca. Thank you so much for inviting me on, for having me, and for creating a really beautiful, good place.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at crownyourself.com. If you go there, there is a wonderful hypnosis, a You Are Worthy hypnosis that I have for you. You are also more than welcome to join our Facebook community, our Crown Yourself community. You can just go to facebook.com/group/crown yourself, and there we are. And you have another opportunity to get another great download from me for Heal Your Money Beliefs. That really is the biggest way that I have been able to transform not only my money beliefs, but also my body beliefs. So if that's something that interests you, and the community is also just amazing. You can always follow me on the Instagrams. And if you love this episode, please take a screenshot of it and tag me in it in your stories. And I would love to hear what your breakaways, your breakthroughs, your ahas were. You can always shoot me a DM at Kimberly.Spencer. Or if you like cheeky quotes on Instagram, you can also follow my company at Crown Yourself Now.
Awesome. Love it. All right, Kimberly, thank you again. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Francesca.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I am giving myself permission to be authentic. No show, no manipulation. I'm showing up fully present and embracing the emotions in each moment. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Everything that Kimberly mentioned will be linked in the show notes. And a few times she mentioned masculine energy, feminine energy. And if you want to learn the difference between the two, make sure to download my free guide, How to Balance Your Masculine and Feminine Energy. You'll learn how each energy manifests, symptoms for being off balance, and how to align again. The link is in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let me know how you're liking the show. See you soon.